Tensions between the United States and China have reached new heights following a series of provocative statements and actions that underscore the volatile dynamics of international relations in East Asia. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth made headlines during the Shangri-La Dialogue, a prominent security conference held in Singapore, where he labeled China a significant threat, particularly in light of its aggressive posture toward Taiwan. Hegseth's remarks claiming that the Chinese military was preparing for imminent action sparked a fierce backlash from Beijing. In a statement issued by China's foreign ministry, officials condemned Hegseth for what they termed a Cold War mentality, asserting that such rhetoric only serves to incite conflict in the region. The ministry emphasized that the Taiwan issue is a matter of national sovereignty and urged the U.S. to refrain from playing with fire. This rhetoric highlights the ongoing friction over Taiwan, an island that China views as a breakaway province while the U.S. maintains a policy of strategic ambiguity. Adding to the complexity of the situation, the U.S. and China had recently agreed to a temporary reduction of tariffs as part of an effort to ease trade tensions. President Donald Trump had announced a reduction of tariffs from 145% to 30% for a 90-day period, a move aimed at fostering negotiations between the two powers. However, Trump's recent statements on social media suggested a return to a more combative stance, accusing China of breaking agreements and hinting at a shift away from diplomatic niceties. The backdrop of these developments included the presence of various international figures at the Shangri-La Dialogue. Notably, Philippine Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro dismissed the notion that the U.S. was the primary instigator of regional tensions. His comments came amid increasing confrontations between the Philippines and China over territorial claims in the South China Sea, where both nations have engaged in a series of violent skirmishes. In a broader context, the Chinese government conveyed its grievances regarding perceived U.S. hegemony and military provocations in the Asia-Pacific. The Chinese embassy in Singapore specifically critiqued remarks made by French President Emmanuel Macron, who had warned against a double standard in addressing conflicts involving China and Ukraine. The embassy's retort underscored China's sensitivity to international criticism and its insistence on defending its territorial integrity. As the geopolitical landscape continues to shift, experts are closely monitoring the implications of these developments for regional stability. The interplay of military posturing, trade negotiations, and diplomatic rhetoric suggests that the U.S.-China relationship may remain fraught with tension in the near future. The recent events signaled that both sides are preparing for a protracted struggle over influence in Asia, raising concerns about the potential for miscalculation and conflict. Looking ahead, analysts suggest that the path to de-escalation will require significant diplomatic engagement and a reassessment of long-standing policies. As both nations navigate this challenging terrain, the stakes for regional allies and global stability remain high, making the coming months critical for the future of U.S.-China relations. In recent days, two significant developments have stirred public discourse in China: the reinstatement of disgraced officials and escalating tensions following remarks by U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth at a defense forum in Singapore. As Beijing grapples with internal governance challenges and external security concerns, these events illustrate the complexities of contemporary Chinese politics and international relations. The case of Xie Qin, a 38-year-old township party chief from Yunnan province, has ignited a heated debate over the Communist Party's approach to discipline and rehabilitation. Xia, who was previously disciplined for a drinking spree during a training session 2 years ago, is now under consideration for promotion. State media has portrayed his potential reinstatement as a success story of rehabilitation aimed at motivating officials who are perceived to be disengaged amid President Xi Jinping's anti-corruption efforts and a sluggish economy. However, public sentiment tells a different story. Social media users have expressed frustration, arguing that allowing such officials a second chance undermines accountability and sends the wrong message about misconduct. Xi's situation is emblematic of a broader trend within the Chinese political landscape, where many officials have been reinstated or promoted after facing disciplinary actions. This pattern has raised concerns among the public about the efficacy of the government's anti-corruption campaign. The Central Commission for Discipline Inspection tasked with rooting out graft has sought to highlight cases of rehabilitation, but the backlash suggests that many citizens remain skeptical about the sincerity of these efforts. Simultaneously, the international arena has become increasingly fraught with tensions, particularly highlighted by Hegseth's remarks at the Shangri-La Dialogue, an annual defense forum in Singapore. During his keynote address, Hegseth characterized China as a potentially imminent threat, warning that it was preparing to use military force to alter the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific region. He specifically referenced concerns regarding an invasion of Taiwan, stating there's no reason to sugarcoat it. The threat China poses is real. And it could be imminent. In response, China's foreign ministry condemned Hegseth's comments as provocative, accusing him of attempting to sow division among nations in the Asia-Pacific. The ministry's statement criticized the U.S. for fostering a Cold War mentality and labeled its characterization of China as a hegemonic power as defamatory. Rear Admiral Hu Gangfeng, leading China's delegation at the forum, echoed these sentiments, asserting that discussions had tried to provoke split and instigate confrontations in the region. The remarks from both U.S. officials and Chinese representatives underscore a growing divide in perceptions of security and sovereignty in the Asia-Pacific. Australia's Defence Minister Richard Morley supported Hegseth's assertions about China's military expansion, which he described as the most significant buildup since World War II. This divergence in viewpoints not only complicates diplomatic relations but also raises concerns about the potential for miscalculations that could lead to conflict. As China navigates these domestic and international challenges, the public's reaction to the rehabilitation of officials and the government's response to external criticisms will be crucial in shaping future policies. The interplay between maintaining political stability at home while addressing perceived threats abroad will remain a delicate balancing act for Beijing. With the global landscape continually shifting, observers will be keenly watching how these dynamics evolve, especially in light of the upcoming political and military strategies from both China and the United States. In the ever-evolving landscape of global trade, recent developments have underscored the complexities and tensions between the United States and China. President Donald Trump has reignited trade hostilities by announcing a dramatic increase in tariffs on steel imports, raising them from 25% to an unprecedented 50%. This announcement, made during a rally in Pennsylvania, aims to bolster the domestic steel industry amidst allegations that China has violated trade agreements. The bad news is that China, perhaps not surprisingly to some, has totally violated ITS agreement with U.S. Trump declared, escalating the already strained relationship between the two economic giants. This latest tariff hike coincides with a fragile détente reached earlier in the month, where both nations had eased previous tariffs. However, Trump's renewed tough stance, coupled with claims from U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer that the Chinese are slow-rolling their compliance, suggests that the truce is already fraying. The implications of these tariffs extend beyond steel, with experts warning that they could lead to increased prices for a wide range of consumer goods from automobiles to groceries. Usha Haley, a trade expert, noted that rising grocery prices would be part of the ripple effects, potentially straining the relationship between the U.S. and its allies without fostering the long-term revival of U.S. manufacturing. The legal backdrop surrounding these tariffs adds another layer of complexity. Following a ruling by the U.S. Court of International Trade that deemed many of Trump's tariffs unlawful, a federal appeals court has temporarily reinstated them. This back-and-forth highlights the precarious nature of Trump's tariff policies, which are now under scrutiny as they may be challenged further up the judicial chain, potentially reaching the Supreme Court. Analysts suggest that the outcome of this legal battle could significantly reshape international trade dynamics and impact investor confidence in Trump's economic management. As the situation unfolds, major companies are feeling the pinch of these tariffs. Retailers like Gap and ELF Beauty are adapting to the changing market landscape, with Gap's CEO Richard Dixon asserting that the company's turnaround plans remain intact despite the trade war's complexities. However, with estimates suggesting that tariff-related expenses could reach up to $300 million this year, the financial ramifications are significant. ELF Beauty, which sources a substantial portion of its products from China, has committed to maintaining its relationships with Chinese suppliers, emphasizing the strategic advantages of its established supply chain. Furthermore, the geopolitical implications of these trade tensions are profound. The Trump administration's aggressive stance towards China, including proposed restrictions on Chinese students and expanded tech sanctions, signals a shift towards a more confrontational approach. As tensions escalate, China's government is also reacting, with Premier Xi Jinping urging a shift towards domestic consumption while facing internal challenges related to an aging population and economic dependence on exports. Looking ahead, the trajectory of U.S.-China relations remains uncertain, with the Trump administration hinting at potential talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The outcomes of these discussions could either pave the way for renewed cooperation or further entrench the adversarial stance that has characterized recent years. As companies navigate the turbulent waters of tariffs and trade, the global economic landscape will likely continue to shift, influenced by both political decisions and market reactions. As we move further into 2025, the stakes are higher than ever, with the potential for significant changes that could redefine international trade norms for years to come. At the recent Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth delivered a striking message to Indo-Pacific allies, warning of an imminent threat from China. His remarks come amid rising tensions over China's military activities, particularly concerning Taiwan, and underscore the ongoing geopolitical complexities in the region. In his keynote address, Hegseth reassured allies that the U.S. would not abandon them in the face of increasing military and economic pressures from Beijing. "We are not going to sugarcoat it, the threat China poses is real. And it could be imminent," he stated emphatically, signaling a commitment to bolster U.S. military presence and capabilities in the region as a countermeasure to China's aggressive maneuvers. He specifically highlighted China's military exercises aimed at simulating a blockade of Taiwan, an island Beijing views as a breakaway province. The response from China was swift and assertive. Rear Admiral Hu Gangfeng, representing the Chinese delegation, accused Hegseth of making groundless accusations and portrayed the U.S. position as one of creating discord in the Asia-Pacific. "These actions are nothing more than attempts to provoke trouble, incite division, and stir up confrontation," Hu asserted, reflecting Beijing's ongoing strategy to counter U.S. influence in the region. Hegseth's speech emphasized the urgency for Indo-Pacific nations to enhance their own defense spending, suggesting they should aim for levels akin to European countries, which are pressured to allocate around 5% of their GDP towards defense. "We must all do our part," he urged, highlighting the need for a collective approach to regional security. The backdrop of these discussions includes China's stated goal of being capable of taking Taiwan by force by 2027, a deadline that analysts consider aspirational rather than definitive. China's advancements in military technology, including hypersonic weapons and fortified artificial islands in the South China Sea, have prompted the U.S. to develop its own missile defense systems known as the Golden Dome. However, the U.S. commitment to the Indo-Pacific has been questioned, particularly in light of recent resource reallocations to address conflicts in the Middle East and Europe. Hegseth acknowledged the challenges posed by these shifts, including the withdrawal of military assets from the Indo-Pacific to bolster defenses against threats in other regions. This has led to concerns about the U.S. military's ability to effectively deter Chinese aggression without adequate presence in Asia. Hegseth's comments were met with mixed reactions from global leaders. European Union's chief diplomat Kaja Kallas countered his assertion that European nations should focus on their own regions, arguing that security in Europe and Asia are interlinked, especially given North Korea's military activities and China's support for Russia amid ongoing geopolitical tensions. As these discussions unfold, the Indo-Pacific nations find themselves navigating a delicate balance between U.S. military support and economic ties with China. Hegseth warned that deepening economic dependence on China could complicate defense strategies during times of crisis.
This sentiment resonates with regional leaders who have expressed concerns over the implications of their economic ties with Beijing.
In this complex landscape, it is clear that the relationships among the US, China, and Indo-Pacific nations will continue to evolve. The dialogue at the Shangri-La conference serves as a critical juncture, highlighting the pressing need for strategic alliances and collective defense initiatives in an era marked by heightened tensions and shifting power dynamics. As the geopolitical landscape develops, the US and its allies must navigate these challenges with a focus on cooperation and preparedness. Anticipating the future implications of China's military ambitions in the region, tensions between the United States and China have reached a new peak, highlighted by a recent exchange involving U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In remarks made at the Shangri-La Dialogue Defense Conference in Singapore, Hegseth declared that China represents a significant and potentially imminent threat to regional stability, particularly in the Asia-Pacific. His comments prompted a fierce rebuttal from China, which accused the U.S. of inciting conflict and undermining peace in the region. During his address, Hegseth warned that China's military activities, particularly its harassment of Taiwan, pose a direct challenge to the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. "China seeks to intimidate you in your own waters," he stated, urging other nations to bolster their military capabilities in response to what he characterized as a credible threat from Beijing. The U.S. Secretary underscored the pressing need for allied nations to prepare for potential military confrontations, asserting, "We are not going to sugarcoat it, the threat China poses is real and it could be imminent." China's foreign ministry quickly condemned Hegseth's remarks, insisting that the U.S. was the true hegemonic power in the region and accusing it of stoking flames in the South China Sea. "No country in the world deserves to be called a hegemonic power other than the U.S. itself," the ministry stated, emphasizing that Taiwan is an internal matter for China. This rhetoric underscores the heightened sensitivity surrounding Taiwan, which China views as a breakaway territory. The backdrop to this diplomatic spat is the ongoing trade war between the two nations, which has seen both sides imposing significant tariffs on each other's goods. Following a brief period of reduced tariffs agreed upon in May, President Trump recently accused China of violating the terms of their agreement and has expressed frustration over stalled negotiations. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent suggested that a breakthrough could be on the horizon, contingent upon a phone call between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. As these geopolitical tensions unfold, a significant domestic event is also on the horizon: South Korea's presidential election. The outcome could reshape the nation's foreign policy approach towards both the U.S. and China. Leading candidate Lee Jae-myung from the Progressive Democratic Party has vowed to take a more pragmatic approach to diplomacy, emphasizing the importance of maintaining strong ties with the U.S. while also managing relations with China and North Korea. His main rival, Kim Moon-soo of the Conservative People Power Party, has taken a hardline stance against both North Korea and China, reflecting the ongoing divisions within South Korea regarding its foreign policy strategy. As the election draws near, many South Koreans express concerns over the implications of the U.S.-China rivalry on their nation's security and economic stability. The stakes are high, with voters acutely aware that their next leader will need to navigate a complex and often hostile international landscape. Whether South Korea will continue its alignment with the U.S. or pivot towards a more balanced approach with China remains to be seen. In conclusion, the geopolitical landscape is fraught with uncertainty. As rising tensions between the U.S. and China continue to affect regional dynamics and domestic politics in South Korea, the forthcoming election could signify a shift in how South Korea positions itself amid these global power struggles. As both nations grapple with their competing interests, the international community watches closely, anticipating the next steps that could either escalate or ease these mounting tensions.